Now, there was something that really caught my eye over the weekend, so it did. There was some protests that took place. It was led by a man that many of you will be familiar with, Tommy Robinson. It took place in London on Saturday. I can't help but notice what this was actually described as by many of the media. Let's just take a look. I was going to sing the next few lines because I actually love that song, but Graham's got in touch and told me to pack it in singing. Apparently I'm hurting his ears. You're a harsh man, Graham. Anyway, look, did you see the way the media reported this protest? Take a look at this. Headline: football hooligans being in town. This was all about the far right. But, I mean, I'm showing you now the protest, and in a second I'll show you these headlines. But look, to me, these are just normal people. They are really raising concerns. Let me get you these headlines so you can just look at this. Here we go. Look, Tommy Robinson supporters attend hate march. Tommy Robinson leads hundreds of football hooligans in march. Far right this and far right that. A couple of things catch my eye there. Well, first of all, if that was hundreds of people, well, I don't know, someone needs to go back to school and learn to count, quite frankly. And this obsession with calling people, smearing people far right and other things like football hooligans and this and that. What's going on? Well, listen, Michelle, that Sweet Caroline clip looked like an awful lot of football games I've been to, actually. I mean, England fans sing that, waving Union Jacks and St George crosses. I rather agree with the inference of your question, that it's too sloppy to use a pejorative descriptor, whether it's far-right, fascist, Nazi or something similar, to describe a particular group of people. I think Tommy Robinson you could explain as being on the far right, but the suggestion that everybody on this process... disagree with that. Maybe they disagree with that. I mean, he's certainly on, I don't know, the nationalistic right, but I wish we'd find better descriptors. Right and left are terms from the French National Assembly from 250 years ago. They're not very good ways of actually summing up politics. I don't know how often we describe, I don't know, Jeremy Corbyn as far left in the mainstream media. And by the way, one of the objectives of this protest was to screen a film, basically, and it was all about what people would regard as two-tier policing. It was all about potentially the concerns that people would have about totalitarian states, the control that many people seem to want to have over us when it came to things like lockdown and so on and so forth. I have to say, I confess, I do not regard any of these concerns as far right. Where are you on this?
So I spent some time this afternoon looking very closely at what took place on Saturday. First, in terms of how it was described, how it was promoted in advance, how it was promoted, who it was promoted to, and some of the things that took place during that march. And it wasn't a few hundred, as you say, but it certainly wasn't anything more than a few thousand in terms of the numbers of the people that took place. And yes, you had a video of people singing and it sounded very happy-clappy, but I've also seen some of the banners of what people put up on that march, and I also saw and heard...
Like what?
Well, they're not for repeating. In my mind, there
can't be anything so bad that we can't even repeat it.
I've got it written down here. I can assure you that it would break Ofcom rules for me to repeat some of the chants that were said, and I'm very happy to say them to you in the advert, but I'm certainly not going to repeat them on air in terms of what people were chanting, which in my mind is not acceptable. You know, this is not. Was it a minority of people doing what you're suggesting, or was it en masse? Because I saw a lot of this too, and I really didn't see en masse people doing anything wrong. Well, again, I reflected on what happened. When I've looked at many different demonstrations, first and foremost, I respect the right of anyone to protest. That's a democratic right in this country, and we should respect that and protect that. However, in terms of the message boards and the ways in which this was promoted and who it was promoted to, again, I was looking at the people that spoke. So we had a speech from Roger Firth, who was from the English Defence League. In my mind, that certainly is a far-right party. I would describe Tommy Robinson as the far-right, and we often hear about groups to the left of Labour being described as hard left or far left. So that is a distinction that I understand, and I think it epitomises certainly elements of what I saw.
So what do you class as far-right, then?
Anything to the right of the Conservatives.
So if someone wants to stop the small boats, because let's face it, the Tories might pretend that they do, but they clearly don't.
I think all parties are talking
So hold on. So if someone wants to control immigration, because the Tories, whilst you might say on paper you do, no, you don't. That's why we've got record net migration. So anyone that believes in controlling your borders, stopping small boats, that's far right to you.
But that's one of Labour's pledges to control migration. That's what we've heard about all over.
No, I'm asking you what you regard as far right, and you've just said anyone to the right of a standard Tory policy.
No, in terms of Tommy Robinson in my mind is far right, and the
I know, but that's why I'm asking you, what do you regard as far right? So, like, for example, you've just said anyone that's to the right of a Tory policy. So I am to the right of a Tory policy, because whatever you might...
So are Tyson Farage.
Yeah. So would you class Nigel Farage as far right?
I think there's elements within that group of people that are far right, yeah.
Well, Farage is definitely to the right of the Conservatives, as is Tice. But I don't think it would be fair to describe them as far right.
I think it would be absolutely
they take a mainstream position. You may disagree with it, but they're mainstream politicians.
We can disagree with the semantics. I think certainly what we saw on the streets of London was not about community cohesion and bringing people together.
That's certainly true.
It's about division. And in my mind, that epitomises...
Hang on, what was about division?
And again, some of the banners that were shown, some of the things that were said on, and if you're allowed to show the speeches, then please do so your listeners can can appraise for themselves.
I spent quite a lot of time because I knew I was going to discuss this topic. So not only did I watch some of the goings on at the protests, and by the way, I just do want to say there was certainly a couple of banners there that I didn't agree with, and I also saw children effing and jeffing in the streets. I really don't approve of that either, actually. Sorry to be uptight about it, but I think it's quite poor parenting if you're taking your kids on the streets and you're encouraging them to be swearing. That's really not cool in my mind.
Yeah.
So I agree with you that there were things there that I certainly wouldn't condone, but this is what I found interesting. The majority of the people there were peaceful, what I would just call normal people who are absolutely sick to the back teeth of the direction of travel that this country has. They feel completely unrepresented by any mainstream politician. Many of them, perhaps I would say, probably won't even turn out and vote. And this lunacy and this obsession with calling people far right. By the way, I don't know if you saw what happened in Germany, by the way, everybody. I can show you a tweet, I think, from Sky News in a second about this one, because you had someone there who had been protesting, raising concerns about what he would regard as the Islamification of Europe. Whilst he was protesting about that, someone who you could reasonably assume to be an Islamist came along and stabbed a number of people, including a police officer who then died. What do people like Sky News do, everybody? They talk about a police officer being stabbed during an attack at a far-right rally. So they're desperately keen to label one side as far-right. They pay no attention whatsoever to the what seems like Islamist fanatic who came along and stabbed multiple people live on air. A man who we now know, by the way, was an Afghan migrant into Germany. Why is that not featured? Why does that not matter in that news headline and those kind of stories?
Well, I think what happened in Germany is absolutely abhorrent, and I hope that person is held to account and faces the full force of the law that I know that they will pursue in Germany. That act in of itself, which is absolutely horrific, doesn't detract from the march itself, which did have elements of the far right in it. The two can be correct. There's not one or the other.
I guess the argument here is what constitutes far right. Because if you're someone who is sick to the back teeth of your children having agendas forced down them when they go to school, i.e. being over-sexualised, if you're someone who does not consent to this uncontrolled immigration and the way it is changing local communities, that indeed is not far right. If you're someone who does not buy into the fact that the climate is literally about to spontaneously combust by the end of this programme, that is not far right. And nobody is standing up for those people when people do.
You're right. I think you're right.
They get called far right, and it's pathetic.
There was lots of different people that attended that demonstration. You're right. There were people that were talking about conspiracy theories around coronavirus, for example. Sure. There were people with lots of different causes that came together. But again, I come back to my point about how this march or this demonstration was promoted and the different sites and message boards and WhatsApp groups in which the details of it were promoted and sent out. And those
what does that mean?
Groups.
What does that mean? So now you've got an issue with where someone advertised the march.
I'm saying in terms of the types of people that were proactively invited to attend. I'm not saying everyone is of that group, and certainly, as we know, there was lots of different issues.
Yeah, but hang on, Luciana. I mean, there were things like Stop the War demos Socialist Workers' Party will be heavily involved in that. You'll almost see on any demo, even moderately to the left, huge banners from the Socialist Workers' Party. But we wouldn't call a demo like that or a demo about public sector pay far left just because it had been promoted within the Socialist Workers' Party network, would we? Even though they're far to the left of the Labour Party. Michelle, I think on this, I don't like the labelling. I think we should report it in a vanilla way. I'm worried, I mean, Luciana may have done you a favour vis-à-vis Ofcom, but I'm worried we can't repeat what was said. I think on national television we should look into that. I found one chant which is definitely offensive, I think you might say. But I'm not really worried about people being offended. And too often, I think we take the view that if you're offended, we can't repeat it. Obviously, if there's incitement to violence or support for a terrorist group or some such like, you've crossed a line. But I think we need to be much more relaxed about people saying things left or right, which might even be a bit wacky, might be a bit offensive.
I think it's worth kind of sharing kind of like where my perspective comes from, because I've had personal experience of people who are very clearly on the far right, including from groups that are now proscribed in this country. So groups like National Action, an organisation that's been banned by the UK government. I have seen 4 people convicted of the death threats and anti-Semitism, the anti-Jewish hatred that they have directed towards me, that come from organisations that themselves say are from the far right, that are included and invited to these marches, not just from National Action, people who...
But anyone was invited. It's an open invite for anyone who is concerned about some of the issues that we've been discussing. It was an open invitation to anyone. When you get any group of large people, any large group of people together, you will always get unsavoury characters, always.
But who do you have at the front? Who was at the front? Who was at the front of the march?
The organisers of the march.
Tommy Robinson. I mean, in my mind, he's very clearly on the far right.
You will say he's on the far right. I can tell you now that many people will disagree. Many people will say that what he is somebody who has the balls to speak out and raise concerns about what many people are experiencing. I've just given you that example of Sky News. Someone who you could very easily assume is an Islamist fanatic comes along and kills a police officer. All the media want to do is call the rally far right. It is a disgrace, ladies and gents. And by the way, I'm going to show you in a second.
There was Nazi chants at that.
In a second, I'm going to show you how these far-right and hooligans left the space. I've got a tweet, actually, just to show you the condition that they left Parliament Square in. But your final points.
I was just going to make the point that in Germany, again, the two things can be true. There were Nazi chants that were made on that march. Nazi
chants. I mean, what is a Nazi chant these days? I mean, because there was a counter-protest to this one, by the way. Counter-protest saying things like Nazi scum off our streets. First and foremost, someone disagreeing with you doesn't make you a Nazi. And secondly, who are you to determine who can and who cannot be on the public streets of Britain? That, to me, sounds a little bit like fascism. And I thought those people actually rejected that. Your thoughts? I'll see you in 2.